Welcome to our Bi-alogue. My name is Dr. Mimi Hoang. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the LA Bi Task Force co-founder and board member, and I'll be the host for our panel today. And the title of our panel is Know Your Bi Plus Rights, Intersections Between Bisexuality and the Law. I'm very, very excited to host today. Our Bi-alogue is a part of a series that the LA Bi Plus Task Force does, where we do interviews with prominent Bi Plus folks on hot topics affecting our community. So I don't know if some of you have seen some of our other panels, but we've done some on Bi Plus elders, what is Bi Plus culture, and we did one last year on Bi Plus mental health. So we're just really excited and grateful to be able to continue doing this series. And our panel today is focusing on legal and civil rights and advocacy, because that is something that does affect our community. Though, you know, some folks might not really be very aware or very informed or knowledgeable about how that affects our community specifically. I think we hear about gay rights, transgender rights, but we don't often talk about how it affects the bisexual, pansexual, fluid, and queer communities. And so that's why I think this is such an important discussion. But really, you know, rules, regulations, policies, all of those things affect our daily lives, right? And that's where systemic bias can really affect someone's livelihood. And so this is why I love this. I'm not a legal expert. I'm a clinical psychologist by trade. And so makes it very exciting for me to learn from everyone today. And so I'm hoping that all of you will learn a lot today as well. And we're also doing this panel in honor of Bi Health Awareness Month in the month of March. And this is a yearly and national campaign to bring awareness to bi health issues because there are health disparities that affect our community. And so this month, you know, we're highlighting that, ways to practice wellness and to be healthier and hopefully lead happier lives. And this year's theme is Beyond Visibility, because, you know, we have been trying to be visible, those of us who do a lot of organizing and activism, but what do we need to do beyond that? And so we felt that having this panel featuring these legal experts and talking about advocacy is definitely the next level. So let me introduce our esteemed panel, and I'm going to start with Heron Greenesmith, who is a policy attorney and advocate who specializes in providing support for Bi Plus communities, currently monitoring anti-LGBTQI rhetoric, networks, and communities as a senior research analyst for LGBTQI justice at Political Research Associates and teaching at Boston University School of Law. Heron has worked in progressive advocacy spaces for over a decade with the National Coalition of Anti-Violence Programs, the Movement Advancement Project, Family Equality Council, and the National LGBTQ Task Force. Heron is an agender parent who uses queer as a personal label and bisexual as a community label. And welcome back, Heron, because you collabed with us many times. And I saw you recently at the Federal Bi Health Policy Roundtable at the White House. So, hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's awesome to be here and to see so many familiar faces.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of your highlights in your personal and professional journey into Bi Plus legal advocacy?
Sure, I would love to. So I came to understand that I wanted to be an attorney when I was in Peace Corps. I did Peace Corps in Ukraine, and yeah, I do have lots of connections there still, and it's not great. while I was in Ukraine and while I was in Peace Corps, I realized that I had unwittingly been involved in a diplomatic mission to advance democracy. And I wouldn't say that I had been like hoodwinked into it, but certainly I didn't have the analysis or the understanding of how international politics work. And understanding that I lacked that context, I wanted to better understand the skeleton, the blueprint of American law. And so I applied to law school and went to American University. I wanted to go to a school that had a robust program on sexual orientation. And at the time, Nancy Polikoff was teaching at American University, and I got to work with her. She is one of the greatest family law attorneys in the country, I guess I would say. And it was an LGBT family law attorney specifically. And a couple things, one of which involves her, helped kind of shape my political theory. And with her, it was actually her book, which is called Beyond Gay or Straight Marriage. I strongly recommend that anyone interested in family law, interested in learning about how, wow, Amanda, on the on the tip with the links up there.
Thank you, Amanda.
Incredible. In Nancy's book, she writes about how the American schema of law, specifically around marriage, where a single toggle on or off comes with a host of rights and responsibilities that you cannot otherwise access without that toggle, is now in American contemporary context an inefficient way to distribute the rights and responsibilities that people need to share with one another. And by introducing the idea of separating all of those rights and responsibilities out and assigning them individually to the people whom you want to access that right or responsibility, she was able to, she's not the first one to think of this, she was able to blow up the idea of what it is to create a relationship, right? Now, when you have, instead of switching on marriage or switching off marriage, if each different right and responsibility is separately indicated, it doesn't matter the gender of the person who you share that right or responsibility with. I can have my best friend visit me in the hospital, and I can have my partner receive my Social Security benefits if I should die. Her analysis made an enormous impact on my analysis, and I strongly recommend anyone go and read that book. It is sorely lacking in bisexual representation, and being in her class was also, I don't mind saying, lacking in bisexual representation. I wrote my final project on like, I don't even remember what it was about, some random bi issue. And she didn't even have the competency around bi to be able to bisexuality, to be able to provide me with a robust mentorship around there. So I will wrap up there unless I have a little bit more time to talk, but I credit Nancy Polikoff with shaping my radical kind of legal theory and really infusing me with the confidence of, when I see bisexuality lacking, to know that I'm probably right, and to know that I have the backing and the knowledge and the competency to respond and to actually make something bi competent. And then, yeah, I'm excited to talk about how that kind of like feeds the rest of my career.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing that. And sometimes it's through sort of things that are missing or lacking that, kind of seeing that we really find an opportunity to fill in those gaps, right? Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you. So next up, I'm going to introduce Ann Tweedy, who is a professor at University of South Dakota, Knudsen School of Law, and an award-winning poet. She is a noted scholar on tribal civil rights and jurisdiction and bisexuality and the law. Ann has served as an in-house attorney for Muckleshoot Tribe and associate professor at Mitchell-Hamlin. She has taught for University of Tulsa College of Law, Michigan State University College of Law, and California Western School of Law. and served as a tribal attorney for Swinomish Indian tribal community and as an associate attorney and of counsel at Kanji and Katzen PLLC. She clerked for the Honorary Ronald M. Gould of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit and for Honorary Rex Armstrong of the Oregon Court of Appeals. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you so much, Mimi. And in terms of my journey to bi advocacy, I would say it started in Seattle when I joined. It was called Seattle Bisexual Women's Network now, and it's changed to Seattle Bisexual Women's and Non-Binary People's Network. And so I think that was like a couple years after I realized I was bi, and I had graduated from law school, and I had come out in Oregon a couple years before that when I was clerking for Judge Armstrong. And then, so it was in Seattle, I started to think more about bi advocacy, and conversations at SBWN kind of led to my first article, which I published wrote years later on whether polyamory was a sexual orientation, my first article in the sexuality and law area. And then, so I think being part of SBWN kind of opened that door to me to start thinking of myself as a bi advocate. And then later on, I worked with a psychologist, Dr. Karen Yuskavage, a bi psychologist, and we created this survey of bisexual people and employment discrimination, and wrote that up. And then currently I'm working on a piece about Marjorie Rowland, who was a plaintiff. She was a bi guidance counselor who was fired or suspended in 1974, and then eventually her contract wasn't renewed. So that's more of a legal history piece. But I would say my journey started in Seattle with the Seattle Bisexual Women's Network. And in law school, unfortunately, I didn't realize that I had this interest, although I was influenced by Professor Linda Krieger and her employment discrimination classes. I took employment discrimination with her and sex discrimination. And so that was very inspiring for me too. And so I think that laid the foundation then for my later work.
Wonderful. Well, I'm pleased to hear that a psychologist helped you in some ways. I've actually met a number of lawyer friends who have partnered up with psychologists or therapists. So maybe there's something there in the collab between our
Definitely.
Wonderful. And I forgot to mention that I was connected to you through a friend. So friend of a friend, Nancy Marcus, who's also well-known bi attorney. All right. So next, I'm going to introduce Eliot Tracz, who's a faculty fellow at New England Law Boston, where he teaches property law and sexual orientation, gender identity, and the law. He has clerked for Judge Kathy Wallace of the Minnesota 3rd Judicial District, worked in private practice litigating property disputes, and providing transactional services on trademarks, and served as Associate General Counsel in the Office of Governor Waltz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan in Minnesota. Outside of teaching, his research focuses on statutory and constitutional interpretation, property rights in outer space, and LGBTQ issues. Eliot is particularly interested in the intersection of bisexuality and the law, and has a forthcoming article, The Inscrutable Bisexual, an essay on immutability, which sounds amazing. Welcome, Eliot.
Hi, thank you. I'm really excited to be here with all of y'all. I guess my journey, I grew up in a small town in Texas, North Texas, so I had trouble accepting that I was something other than straight until I was probably done clerking for Judge Wallace, and I don't think I had a name for it or the ability to accept it until one of my best friends, who would also clerk with me, helped me kind of embrace that. Going from there into private practice was just kind of seeing how both in the legal profession and in the community, there were no other queer people of color who I could find in a smallish city in Minnesota. And then, you know, where there's a vacuum, right, you either give up or you kind of fill your own space. So it became very important to me to try to find LGBTQ clients who needed representation and shared lived experience, because I think that that's very important, for the same reason that it's important for a person of color to walk into a courtroom and see attorneys and judges who look like them. Then kind of moving into the governor's office, it kind of had to take a back seat because you know, the last thing you want to do is draw attention to anything other than your employer's policies. But moving into academia, I feel like it's been very important to me that my students see people who look like them, who worship like them, and who love like them, and know that we're here in the profession for them. We're in the law schools teaching them, and we're helping prepare them to go out and meet clients who are like them. So I guess for me, a lot of it is just about representation.
Absolutely. I hear you on that. And I'm so glad that you're here. I definitely, you know, understand, yeah, representation matters, right? So welcome. And last but not least is Ezra Young, who's a nationally recognized scholar and civil rights attorney in New York. He's a visiting assistant professor at Cornell Law School, where he teaches constitutional law, critical race theory, and transgender people and the law, and maintains a boutique private practice focusing on trans rights. Ezra's scholarly work focuses on trans rights and innovative equitable remedies at the intersection of federal courts, civil procedures, remedies, and constitutional law. Ezra serves as vice president of the board of the Jim Collins Foundation and the board of the African American Policy Forum, and is a founding board member and past co-chair of the National Trans Bar Association. And I got to meet Ezra in person also at that federal bi-health policy meeting at the White House in September. So welcome, and nice to be working with you again.
Nice to see you and be working with you too, Mimi, as well as some of the other panelists. I'll keep this brief. For me, being bisexual was never a particularly big deal. Maybe the experience of being trans, Latino, and all of these other things, it just seemed like one more thing. And by the time I got to that point in my life, despite it being, you know, in my teenage years, it was just like, I just don't give a fuck anymore. This is just who I am. Most of my legal work is probably best characterized as promoting racial and gender justice, almost exclusively for trans people, but occasionally I have other clients and cases. My academic work is mostly about trans rights issues and then esoteric issues in constitutional law that only my mentors, my wife, and like 2 friends actually read, and my colleagues at Cornell, because they're gracious. Most of my bi-advocacy is sort of, I can echo what Eliot said. It's about being present in spaces. My students know I'm bi. You know, when I went to DC, I had to cancel class. So I explained to my students why I was canceling class and taught them a little bit about advocacy and why it was necessary, and passed them some things to learn about bi-health disparities. Sort of like the other panelists, while I do lend sort of my legal and scholarly expertise to our issues, a lot of what I do, especially as a man who's married to a woman, is mostly just take up space, help elevate other people's voices, and occasionally consult on thorny legal issues that I think most of the other panelists have probably consulted on.
Great, fantastic. Well, again, this is such a talented and illustrious panel. I feel just so grounded and safe being surrounded by attorneys right now in this room. So let's get right to the questions. So I have some questions that I planned for today, and so we'll all discuss that, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end. But let's start with, you know, you've talked about some of your work and what's led you here, but what are some of the civil and legal rights issues impacting our community specifically that you've been seeing in your line of work? And whoever wants to start. can go ahead.
So I'm very much a litigation focused person. It's just that's my comfortable zone. So one thing for me was, while clerking, a number of marital dissolutions where there was a bi partner, and kind of seeing that weaponized in situations involving childcare or general trustworthiness of partners, and finding that the judicial system is really not educated or competent to take that sort of messaging and maybe divorce it from reality is the wrong way to phrase it, but to sort of parse that out and remove it from any relevance, because it's, one, usually not true, but also just not really relevant to the law itself.
I would say, and I don't have the litigation experience that Eliot has, and then my litigation experiences in the Indian law area also, but I have seen the laws, of course, targeting LGBT people and trans people, and it seems that quite a large percentage of trans people identify as bi, and trans people and bi people tend to be allied with each other. So I would say that's a huge issue. And then specifically with bisexuality, I think that the erasure that happens in litigation with when you see impact litigation that talks only about that lesbian and gay people as plaintiffs, that can create some ambiguity that people who do want to discriminate against bi people can see as kind of an opportunity. And so there is a case called Bear Creek Bible Church where the plaintiffs actually did try to, or the litigants tried to argue that they could discriminate against bi people because the Bostock case didn't specifically mention them, and that was struck down by the court. But I think that the erasure that's quite common can appear to create opportunities, and at least can sow confusion that that litigants can try to take advantage of, and hopefully won't be successful. So I think that that's an issue. And then there's the it's a few years old now, but a case about a queer softball league, Appalato, where in that case the bisexual plaintiffs were suing the queer softball league for excluding them, and there were some issues, disparate impact on people of color, because most of the bi players that were excluded were persons of color, and the court just didn't seem to be able to conceive of what it meant for a gay softball league to discriminate against bi people. So I think there's a lot of education that would need to be done in litigation. So those are some things that come to mind there.
I can speak to both litigation things as well as sort of policy and, I guess, advice that I've given to different federal administrations. So much like the other panelists brought up, there's a lot of, we all know this is bi people, just erasure in culture and politics, and more so in law, because law is a little bit extra screwed up in regular life. A lot of what I've encountered is simply just the need to speak up and clarify, sort of like Anne suggested, that, you know, if you're talking about trans rights issues, you're often talking about bi rights issues as well. You know, if my impact plaintiff is bi, and that's pertinent because they were treated like crap at school because of all of their different identities and who they are, it's something you have to learn how to professionally and matter-of-factly explain to decision makers, make sure that they're aware that's not something that the client's afraid of or that they're shameful of. Same deal with advising, mostly advise federal agencies. Oftentimes I'm brought in to discuss trans rights issues, healthcare issues. I try to make sure that there's an awareness of, you know, sexual health of transgender men who are bi. It's beyond just surgical and pharmaceutical care. sexual health is part of healthcare. And I would say personally, sexual health is one of the great parts of life. And we all want to be able to engage in it healthfully and get appropriate access to medical care. So it's reminding people to have a nuanced and intersectional view of what it is for someone to be LGBT. As far as sort of like policy advocacy stuff goes, as part of my role as a board member of the African American Policy Forum, we're actively involved in the ground on supporting efforts to protect critical race theory from exclusion from public education around the nation right now. And part of the work that I do at a very high level with other critical race theorists is making sure that we connect and articulate the assaults on critical race theory to parallel and interlapping movements to attack queer theory and LGBT rights in education and beyond. Again, some of that work is simply bringing a bi perspective and knowledge as a scholar to how these issues are intersecting and interrelated. Part of it is making sure that just because we're focusing on the poor ways that people of color are being treated, that we also remember that there are bi people in those communities, just like there are bi trans people, and that it's not really an option to only try to protect one aspect of someone's identity or one aspect of knowledge production. You really have to protect all of them.
I guess I'll sum up. I don't litigate at all. I do a lot of policy, and I think that if I could sum up policy erasure for bi folks, it would be not counting us, not seeing us, not talking about us, despite us being the largest proportion of the LGBT community and a growing proportion of youth, of just people in general. Some counts show a quarter of youth identify as bi, depending on which population you're talking about.
Right.
I'm working on a project right now with the organization IPASS, which is an international sexual health and reproductive rights organization, reproductive health organization. And we are, we've talked to 20 bi youth and sexual health, comprehensive sexual education advocates and educators around the world, in Kenya, in Ghana, in the Philippines, in Brazil, in the United States, in Canada. And we asked about experiences of messages that folks had heard about bisexuality, about pansexuality within their comprehensive sexual education experiences, or more frequently within their sexual education experiences, because the vast majority of them did not receive comprehensive sexual education. There was something lacking, whether it was because it was abstinence only, or because there wasn't any sexual education in their in any of their community spaces, whether that's school or church or a community center. And unfortunately, these folks hear a lot of really negative things about bisexuality and pansexuality. And many of the educators and advocates work hard in order to counter those stories. But it's very difficult in a country like, for example, Ghana or the United States, that are actively trying to legislate away protections based on sexual orientation and gender identity, and then to legislate in persecution based on sexual orientation and gender identity. It's very difficult to target specific populations within your own advocacy, whether you're teaching comprehensive sexual education or you're asking for comprehensive sexual education from a school board or a county or a state or even the federal level, when that level of persecution exists. So I want to give us a little bit of grace, because we are living in a much more heightened milieu of persecution than we were, say, 5 years ago. And also to acknowledge that that persecution is having impacts on bi people and bi youth, even when we aren't mentioned, and sometimes because we're not mentioned. And so all of this erasure that we're talking about is having serious impacts on us.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, is when we're not named that creates in itself a civil rights issue or a gap or a, just a risk for being mistreated or being not supported adequately. Yeah. So thank you for sharing all of that in what you're doing right now. Kind of opening things up more to current legislation and the trends that have been happening. I actually just received a training around LGBTQ elders, and the speaker kind of reminded us that it was only in 2009 that the Matthew Shepard law recognizing hate crimes against LGBTQ folks, came into effect, right? So that was only 14 years ago, if you can believe it. So what would you say, just in your reflections and analysis, are the trends that you've been seeing in LGBT-related legislation, both positive and negative?
I can talk about the negative, but I would prefer to do that after folks talk about the positive. If that helps.
Okay.
Well, I think we could start by pointing out that I guess it was either yesterday or today, New Mexico voting to expand their anti-discrimination laws to explicitly include LGBTQ protections. Recently, Michigan as well. Seen some positives coming out of Minnesota. I think there are definitely states taking big strides. I'm hoping that Massachusetts will follow with a few more protections soon. But I think there's definitely, at the state level, new laws coming in as well. The considerations for allowing men who have intimate relations with men to donate blood as well. I think there's a lot of positive movement forward that can get lost amongst all of the horrible bills that we're seeing filed in the state. So I think there's definitely some positives to look at as well.
Yeah, I saw the bill, or it might have been an executive action from Minnesota saying that they were going to not share information about gender affirming care with other states. So that seemed very positive. And then in terms of positive, also the act at the federal level protecting same-sex marriage was very positive. And now and then, a horrible bill fails, like we had a bill to ban drag performances in South Dakota that failed. And so things like that I count as positive, but there are so many negative things as well.
If I can just quickly piggyback off of that, in my own research on a current project, something like 91% of the bills last year that were anti-LGBTQ failed. So
yay.
That's not getting a lot of press, but the numbers are good.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you for saying that, because I think for many of us who aren't in that world, we're just getting the worst news. So that's encouraging.
Do you even want me to talk?
Of course.
I'm
we got to hear the good and the bad.
I mean, the bad, everybody knows the bad. The bad's really, 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 really bad right now. Ezra, do you have anything other than just, you went off mute. I didn't know if you wanted to say something not horrible.
I can have a positive swing on the bills that are and are not passing.
Yeah.
So I probably got a greater appreciation for this first in practice, and then more so being a law professor. Here's the deal. State legislatures do wacky, terrible things all the damn time. That is why courts exist, to strike that shit down. Whatever these lawmakers are doing, no matter where they are, the US Constitution protects you, your state constitution protects you explicitly or not. Some states like Minnesota, which has been sort of the standard bearers for decades for LGBT rights, are right there on the ground, passing positive laws faster than anyone could introduce negative laws anywhere else. That doesn't mean that any of us is fully insulated from shitty people shouting swears at you on the street, bad experiences with doctors when you're trying to get PrEP, crappy family members who say nasty things at holiday dinners. Those are still the things that we have to deal with. And that's sort of what Mimi's research and advocacy is trying to deal with, right? But as far as the law is concerned, if nothing else, it provides the possibility of protecting you and allowing you to thrive and live your best life, even in the bleakest of circumstances. I cut my teeth as a litigator, litigating almost exclusively in federal courts in red states. And the joke, but it is true and it remains true, I always drew the most conservative far right-wing judge in that district court, no matter what, even though it's supposed to be random every time. Nonetheless, there are ways to get our points across to these folks. It's the rare person, state or federal judge, who is actually as vehemently disrespectful as the people that you see highlighted in the news stories. They're literally exceptions to the rule. That's why they make headlines. The vast majority of judges, state and federal and local judges, are good people. They might be a little bit ignorant, but a lot of them are willing to learn, and a lot of them are willing to hear us out. Part of that has become even more embracing of us and our needs in our lives over time as we've slowly began to integrate the state and federal judiciaries. We have now openly bi judges. We did not have openly bi judges when I was in law school more than a decade ago. We knew that some of them must be bi statistically, right? But no one was open about it. Now a new bi judge gets named to a state or local court. It doesn't really make headlines anymore because there are enough people who are out that it's no big deal. That makes a huge difference. Judges having interactions with openly bi, openly LGBT people makes a huge difference. Literally just meeting us, knowing we exist, seeing us as colleagues, as counsel, as former law clerks, as siblings, as friends, makes a world of difference. So even though we should fight tooth and nail, and Heron's sort of leading the way on that, along with a lot of other folks in our community, to fight back these nasty bills so they don't become laws. If they do become laws, that's where the litigators, get to step in, and that's where the courts get to step in. A lot of crap gets passed every year. A lot of it can get struck down. A lot of it can be challenged in court. And the other thing I would point out is we do not always need laws that expressly protect us. I'm a constitutional scholar. Our Constitution's crap. It's less than 8,000 words long. You kind of have to fill in a lot of blanks to figure out what the hell it means. But the vast majority of unfair treatment that we experience in family law, that we can experience in the workplace, that we can experience in school, these are things you can go after usually with existing laws or with existing constitutions. And that's part of what a lot of our colleagues like Nancy Marcus has spent their lives and careers, scholarly and otherwise, sort of threading the needle for us, okay? So this isn't like it was 50 years ago where you literally have to invent the wheel to come up with the legal arguments to help people. We have tried and true arguments already put together for a lot of issues, and we have a lot of dedicated, brilliant advocates all over the nation who are able to do this to help you. So that doesn't mean that you're not going to experience crap. You will, unfortunately. That's why lawyers exist. But there are people who are educated, who are part of your community, who are able to help push back and do justice by you.
That's good to hear that there are positive movements, and thank you for sharing some sense of hope there, Ezra, in this darkness, and having more out by judges. That feels just so important. Out judges, right? Maybe not all judges have been out in the past, but that's where if you do hold some position of power in some way, I think being out really kind of makes you like a bi beacon, as I call it, where then other people will know about you and maybe come to you or get information it can really have a really nice, butterfly effect in that way. Yeah. Heron, did you want to add anything before we move on?
I mean, maybe I should have gone first, because I felt like a good note is good to end on. I will say a couple things. I'll say first, in response to Victoria, check out lgbtmap.org, the Movement Advancement Project. They are mapping every single law that passes. They have all the citations. They have all the links directly to the laws. You can search by state, you can search by issue. They are incredible. So if you're ever wondering where we are on a specific issue, check out Movement Advancement Project. The website again is lgbtmap.org. I think they're moving to a different website, but I don't know what it is, and that's an easy one. I think they're still going to keep it. I think I want to depress people a little bit by saying that in the midst of all these anti-trans bills, they're still passing other horrible bills. There are bills being passed that would allow people to discriminate on the basis of specific couples or groups of people who want to get married. And I'm so sorry, the marriage, what's it called? RMFA, the marriage bill. What's the R stand for? Respect for Marriage Act.
Respect,
I got there.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda. The Respect for Marriage Act has a prohibition on polygamy at the federal level, which we are going to have to repeal if we want to spread protections for, recognition for families with more than two parents, and non-discrimination protections for more than two parents, or litigated, absolutely. And then the final thing I wanted to say is that, while they're passing these other laws, some of them include these religious exemptions that allow you to discriminate against couples. Please watch the religious exemptions. They're still passing. I think I pulled up the, we have 23 states with statutory RFRAs, still only one state. I'm sorry, a RFRA is a Religious Freedom Restoration Act that provides some mechanism greater than that of the federal Constitution for people to choose to act in a certain way based on their religious beliefs or their moral beliefs in some cases. We still have 12 states that permits state licensed child welfare agencies to refuse to place or provide service to children and families, including bi folks. We have 2 states that allow private businesses to deny service to married same-sex couples. That obviously includes a ton of bi folks. And we have 7 states that have targeted medical religious exemptions that allow medical professionals to decline to serve LGBT clients. So there is more going on than these anti-trans bills right now. And I think that a lot of states are using the cover of the anti-trans bills to just pass pardon my French, a lot of bullshit. I will end there because I don't want people to leave.
I just have this is just tiny positive additions that don't in any way compare to what Heron just described, but I did want to mention it's not specifically legislative, but there was a conversation at Lavender Law a couple of years ago that Ezra was part of, where LGBT organizations committed to promoting and serving their bi constituents, which was groundbreaking and really exciting. So Lambda Legal, for example, Center for Lesbian Rights, and so National Center for Lesbian Rights, and so that was an exciting development. And there are also a couple of cities in Massachusetts that did open up their domestic partnership laws to more than two couples, more than 2 people in the couple, Cambridge and Somerville. So just not in any way, I don't think it has any comparison to what Heron was talking about, but I did want to mention those 2 things.
Hey, Anne, I have a secret for you, and you can't tell anyone, okay?
Okay.
Somerville is passing the first non-discrimination protection for poly and consensually non-monogamous people next week.
Oh, that's amazing. I'll keep my eye out.
Your secret's safe with us.
Okay, good. And the third municipality is Arlington, Massachusetts. And if you go to polyamorylegal.org, you'll find the Polyamory Legal Advocacy Coalition, which is a group of us who are working on those ordinances.
Oh, that's awesome.
Me. You should join us, Anne.
I will, for sure.
Yeah, sign up for our newsletter, please.
Yeah, thank you. I will.
Polyamorylegal.org. Thank you, Ezra.
I'm joining
well,
you too.
Sorry, what was that?
Yay.
Oh, I said I'm joining you too.
Hell yeah.
We're just connecting everybody here today. But yeah, I think even though there's sad and scary things, Heron, I think it's just an important reminder that we've got to stay aware about what's happening around us, because it does impact our families. Kind of extending into the Bi Health Month kind of theme is, why are we talking about legal stuff within health, right? Like, how do you think these issues legally, legislation, policy-wise, how do you think it impacts people's physical and mental health?
There is some important research on that. There are a couple articles by Mark Hatzenbuehler. I usually read it and not say it, but so hopefully I pronounced that right. But showing that anti-LGBT laws do have these negative impacts on LGBT people's health, and he studied basically state DOMA's anti-marriage equality laws, and found an impact there in terms of like generalized anxiety disorder and mood disorders increasing among LGBT people if they lived in those states. And so I think there is a lot of strong documentation on that in the social science realm.
And then Dr. Brian Dodge, I was writing this out in the chat, but I'll just say it here. I think, folks, is he at Kentucky, Mimi? And
he moved to, didn't he move to Arizona?
Arizona. Was he at Indiana?
He was at Indiana, right, and recently moved.
He has developed a bias scale to look at anti-bi bias, to measure anti-bi bias and its impact on bi folks, and so he is the originator of the research that found that, I believe, that anti-bi bias from fellow community members, so gay and lesbian people, while quantitatively less than the anti-bi bias we face daily from straight people, non-queer people, has a greater impact. Perhaps because we expect respect and dignity from our fellow queer people. But I definitely look up the bias tool from Dr. Brian Dodge. I can see Ezra furiously Googling that, but I can also furiously Google it too.
Yeah, because there is also discrimination from that end too, right? Like the gay men's softball league situation. I think we've been talking mostly about cis-het discrimination, right? But there can also be gay and lesbian discrimination as well. Thank you for sharing that, Heron.
This is one of the largest pieces, just a huge piece from 2014, so a while ago, but an enormous piece on anti-bi bias.
Yeah, and Mike in the chat there put negative news is not bad for us. It should motivate us and we can figure out what to do about it. Thank you for that reframe. Other thoughts on health and mental health?
I can add to sort of state the obvious. So there is lots of social science research that is doing an amazing job for the first time in decades of mapping the unique experiences of bisexuals, some of them positive, many of them the stuff that we're used to dealing with, the bullshit day-to-day stuff that is, qualitatively and quantitatively, mapped now, at least better. But just to remind everyone, and this is sort of on the positive side of things, our very diverse community has made a lot of inroads in health and law that is allowing many of us to thrive. I'm 36, but I still grew up in the era of, if you have sex, you're risking death. Because what if you get something and there's no more of you, right? That, if nothing else, teaching law students reminds me how old I am every day. And my students, they just, by the time they were sexually active, their world was entirely different. It was not the risk of death. It was not, for many of them until a little bit more recently, risk that, if I get pregnant, that's the end of my career. That's the end of other things I wanted to do, right? There's more acceptance to people to single parent. There's more acceptance to people to create families of their own choosing, to support them how they want to and not how they don't want to. With Obamacare, more Americans than ever have access to some health insurance, albeit not always quality health insurance, right? A lot of hospitals, physicians' offices, young med students, psychologists are getting trained on our community and our issues. They might not always be perfect allies or perfect supporters, but a lot of people out there are actually doing their best to learn this stuff and figure it out. And for older members of our community, they probably don't forget as much as the younger members of our community, including those that are younger than me, that these are tremendous strides forward for our health, right? So we can measure the negative impacts, but it makes a world of difference if you can see a therapist to talk about what's going on, if you can get medications, if that helps you, if you can access just basic preventative care, if you can access other care that you need to live your life sexually or otherwise as a full person, right? These are positive advances. Now, there are a lot of things that we have to keep pushing for. There are some crackpot federal judges who will issue a nationwide injunction at the drop of a hat to harm whoever they want at the drop of a hat. But life for many of us is so much better today that we still have a lot of places for growth. And anyone who's contemplating going to law school or brushing off their law license, there's a lot that you can do out there to help open things up. Something I'll also add is there's a burgeoning movement, and Anne and others here can talk about it, helping Indigenous communities as they're reasserting their tribal sovereignty, thanks to a few recent Supreme Court cases, to better integrate traditional understandings of gender and sexuality into their laws and their legal practice and their court systems. I can say I'm a member of one tribal nation's bar, and that's something that I do with them pretty actively. I'm definitely the first trans person and first queer person that's ever been part of the SAM Bar Association, at least openly. But they've been receptive to these issues. If you show communities respect, you study their traditions, you study their history, and you're a big old law nerd and willing to help them, exercise their tribal sovereignty, they do become interested in this stuff. And suddenly other members of the bar, other members of their communities come out and they start speaking up. And that's a really beautiful thing. It's just opportunities everywhere. To make inroads. It doesn't have to be federal, policy advocacy. It doesn't have to be protests outside the governor's office, unless, you're in Texas, you should go protest outside Abbott's office and outside his home. But there are a lot of different inroads out there.
Well, I think that leads me straight to my next question, Ezra. So thank you for that. Is what can people do if you're a viewer right now, or, know someone out there where their rights are being infringed upon? What can people do other than call all you all amazing people? But, are there certain directions that you would sort of point people in Do people need to contact Bi-alogue, which I think is that the only bisexual kind of legal association or body out there? Yeah, so what would you recommend people do for advocacy, legal advocacy?
I would almost always recommend, if you can, your state's LGBTQ bar association. A lot of them post directories where maybe you can find someone who specializes in your area of need. And another is law school clinics, although you have to be careful with depending on the state you're in. But like my school, New England Law, has a program for helping people change their gender markers on legal documents. So you can sometimes find law school programs where the students get the experience, you get the help you need at little or no cost, which may also point you in the direction of legal advocacy, that where the advocates have a personal stake, both as part of their learning experience, but also as a part of your community.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Depending on the issue, you may also be able to get help from the impact organizations that focus on LGBT issues like Lambda Legal or National Center for Lesbian Rights or the ACLU. So those are other places to look. I think law school clinics are great if you can get help there as well. And Harvard has a legal clinic devoted to LGBTQ issues also.
Go ahead, Ezra.
Okay. In addition to that fabulous advice, remember that part of accessing legal services is being a consumer. If you hire someone to clean your house, to help you with your taxes, whatever it is, if you need legal services, if you need a divorce attorney, an adoption attorney, someone to help you with your patent case, you can affirmatively seek out a bi attorney, throw us business, help people move up in their careers. If you're in a position of hiring people, you can seek out bi people and give other people in our community opportunities. A lot of us got to the positions we did in life, professionally and otherwise, because there were helping hands. A lot of them for a lot of bi people or other bi people, right? So remember that that's always an option. I can also say, if nothing else, law is incredibly complicated, but it's also kind of easy for a lot of things. Be a squeaky wheel. Just do your best to articulate what you think happened that was wrong and why it should be fixed. If you can't afford an attorney, you do have your own voice. Most of us have smartphones. Most of us can get a friend to help us type something out if we need that. You can be your own advocate. A lot of us have had to be our own advocates. It's never fun, though I've been my own lawyer more times than I've been anyone else's lawyer in my life. That's just kind of how things work, right? But you can be your own advocate and you can push forward. That's a lot of how law innovates over time. The only advice I could give you to that is, and this is just general advice for anyone in any legal context, be exceptionally polite and respectful to everyone around you. If you are exceptionally polite and respectful, people will just start helping you. All of a sudden, the clerk at the court will fix the documents that you just wildly filled out wrong. All of a sudden, the judge will just start respecting you and start telling you, there's things you didn't ask for that you should have. I think that you want to ask for this, and then listen to what they're saying and ask for that, right? We all have a lot of power. You don't have to go to law school, though. If you want to go to law school, do it. Reach out to those of us who teach at them. Reach out to those of us who've been through it so we can help you with it, but you can be your own advocate. And a lot of these issues are things that you can advocate for. If you find yourself with a workers' comp attorney and they're bigoted against you because you're bi, you can complain and get a new lawyer. You can drive home a message that that's not an acceptable way to treat someone, right? In addition to that, because that is difficult, have friends that you can vent to, bi or otherwise. Life is frustrating. You can get through a lot of these legal challenges, a lot of just the day-to-day minutia of, stuff that's rough, but having a support network, having mental health care if you need it, having a trustworthy therapist if you're just working through some stuff and you need someone who can help support you doing that, it makes all the difference.
Yeah, and I think, that's such an important reminder about community, right? Like maybe that's the first place to start is to find a BI+ community or group near you, or contact us here at the LA BI+ Task Force, because sometimes that just helps you build up a little bit of that nerve to take that next step that's kind of scary.
I was actually going to say community. Number one for me, community, community, community. Community insulates us, community supports us, community provides us with what we need. By community, sure, but also your local community, also, folks online, also your family, chosen and origin, and also, like Ezra said, your friends. Those are the people who are going to insulate you from the things that happen in our lives, insulate us from the things that happen in our lives. I'll give a couple more resources. Diana Adams, I think LLC, is a law firm run, staffed, led, founded by bi and trans people. And they have a nonprofit called Chosen Family Law Center that offers low, meow, so it's me meowing at my kid, that offers low and no cost legal services for kinky folks, for poly folks, for bi folks. And I recommend reaching out to both or signing up for newsletters, both at Diana Adams Law and at Chosen Family Law Center. As Ezra said, when we support bi folks, then we build our own communities.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Heron. So the last question is kind of a slight twist here. Since we are talking about health and wellness, share some of the tips or practices that you do to take care of your health and wellness. What do attorneys do after a long, hard day?
Well, I don't have attorney specific things, but like meditation and running are really helpful to me, and then connecting with friends, which goes off what was said earlier, but that's been huge. And then some online communities, or there isn't a huge bi community in Vermilion, although there is a queer community, but I participate in online bi groups and find that really helpful.
Mike wrote attorneys that he knows heads to the bottle and a nice sofa.
I mean, there are days where that is a good way to unwind, to be frank. But I think figuring out what you need for yourself, we're all individuals, we're all idiosyncratic in special ways. Some of us enjoy exercising, cooking. I am, among other things, devoutly Catholic. I pray a lot. It helps me center the way other people meditate. And it's something that helps me feel anchored in addition to all of the other things that I do. Ironically enough, I gave up alcohol for Lent, so I'm jonesing for some whiskey right now, but it'll be a little bit longer for that. Yeah, pets, hobbies, things that I would say I try to have a few things in my life that are just kind of simple and not part of the political fray. So like I started building Legos during the pandemic. Legos are pure. Like no one hates Legos. There's nothing bad happening to Legos other than losing a few pieces. We're spending way too much money on them. But they're just things that you can have that are just for yourself. It's not work. It's not anything else. Something that gives you sort of special joy that you don't depend upon others for. And again, I can't say this enough. If you do need more serious help, reaching out to people and getting help. You don't have to suffer alone. You're not the first person or the last person to deal with different things, whether it's mental health, physical health, career ups and downs, family ups and downs. You can always reach out to people and get the help that you need. You might not need it forever. You might need it forever. But there are lots of different things that you can do for yourself. You don't have to just sort of drown in the malaise that sometimes is easy to overtake us nowadays.
say that creative endeavors of any sort, one thing I found litigating is I spend a lot of my time breaking things down or destroying things other people have built, and that didn't sit well with me. So even if it's, just cooking, making something, it's cathartic. And dogs fix everything.
Yeah, we have some comments in the chat about pets, smutty fantasy books, and journaling and blogging. I think those are all amazing ways.
Less time on Twitter. It very rarely brings your day up, usually brings it down.
Yes. Yeah. Me over here in Southern California, the beach, although it's been quite rainy, but going outside, just walking, seeing the sky and not just, the walls in my office or my house. Yeah. Well, wonderful.
Sorry.
Heron, go ahead.
I was going to say, psychiatric medication is incredibly, incredibly important.
It can help many, many people. Therapy, medications, whatever health treatments that are, important to you. Absolutely. And I know you were sharing is it knitting or okay. Crochet.
I'm making them for my partners because I'm gay.
Lovely.
To say that, just to pull in community again, pull in family, chosen and origin again, pull in creativity again. Like I'm sitting on a bi panel. My kid just came up. I'm making crochet blankets for my triad. Like it's like I'm living the life. You can live the life.
Wonderful. So before we open it up, what are any new projects that you're all working on, and how can our viewers follow your work, support your work? Let us know.
That iPass project on bisexual comprehensive sexual education will be coming out of iPass. So please sign up for their newsletter. We'll be making, it won't be a report, it'll be a series of beautiful images and quotes and takeaways from the project. And it's going to be so bisexual. We're really excited about it. So iPass is just capital IPAS. I don't think it ever had a acronym, or I don't know what it stands for, but make sure you sign up for iPass's newsletter and also Political Research Associates, where I work, because we do cool stuff all the time.
And feel free to type anything into the chat for folks.
I'm working on a paper that I mentioned that's coming out in Harvard Journal of Gender and the Law about a bi plaintiff she started her case in the 70s, Marjorie Rowland versus Mad River Local School District, but it didn't get heard by the Sixth Circuit until I think their decision was in 1984, and then the Supreme Court denied cert in 1985. But that's been super interesting to me, and I think telling bi stories is really important. And so I interviewed her and got some information about her life that wasn't out there. And then there is a recent book about her by some education professor, so I pull in a lot of that. But I think it's just incredible to listen to bi stories, and so there's one that you could read, but plenty of others out there by oral histories, I think are really important. And I can put a link. I'll put a link in the chat to that.
Mm-hmm. And your poetry.
Oh, definitely. Poetry. I love poetry and write poetry, not as much as I would like to, but that's definitely wonderful to read, and a way to relax for me too.
Eliot, thank you for saying something.
I have two papers. One is on the role of storytelling in bisexual jurisprudence. I think given the long history of erasure of bisexuality in the law, individual stories are really important in helping, it's hard to dislike someone you know. And I think the more people are exposed to our existence and how absolutely normal it is, the harder it becomes to erase us. And then I have another one in progress, which is I'm going on the job market this coming fall. So it will be my job talk paper on litigation strategies in cases involving gender nonconformity. And then, trying to find the time and the courage to get the personal website up.
Things to look forward to coming out from Eliot Tracz this year. Ezra, anything from you?
Sure. I think something that I really care about as a bi person is making sure that when we convene these spaces, whether it's online, in person, that we're radically inclusive of all of the members of our community. I think sometimes we're yearning so much to have a spotlight on bisexual lives that we sometimes have a very single axis way of thinking about who is bi and what that means. So that gives me a segue. I'd encourage folks to join efforts to push back against the various laws, bills that are trying to shut out different sorts of knowledge from public education all around the nation. As I mentioned before, I'm on the board of the African American Policy Forum. We're a gender and racial justice think tank, and we do amazing work all over the place. But one of our big things that we do is we support affirmative action and critical race theory, as well as other things. I'm going to link you guys to our website. There's a letter that you can sign that I actually wrote because my mentor needed help, because that's how you support other people when they need help, where you can add your voice to the number of advocates, educators, teachers, people on the ground who don't want lawmakers to use their politics to ban what kids and students, including law students, learn in publicly funded schools. The other thing I would say is you can be your own advocate if you're not seeing spaces online or otherwise that include people with your background, with your experiences. You can always create those spaces. It can be a Twitter hashtag thread. It can be, a group signal, chat. It can be just a thread with your friends on Apple Chat or whatever the heck we call it now. Just so that you can create those spaces. Sometimes all it takes is a few people to sort of pull a few folks they know together, and all of a sudden you get traction and you have these spaces. So if you're not seeing the kinds of spaces that you want or wish existed, you can do something about that.
Strength in numbers, I say. Yeah. Organize, connect, find your own community. And thank you, Mike, in the chat. The LA Bi Plus Task Force has a Bi Plus blog as well. So that's also a way for people to follow. And we'll be sure to keep an eye out on all of your projects, and hopefully we'll be blogging about it. Wonderful. Well, that concludes the questions I had. We're going to continue recording. So we'll open it up to Q&A. And if people want to share any questions, I don't think there might have been some questions. My faithful assistant Gladys is going to help me make sure that I get all the questions that we can today. All right. So I see 2 questions from Carrie. What bias have you seen in domestic violence areas? More discrimination against bi people or more erasure? And the second was, what book recommendations do you have with bi main characters, any genre?
Well, C.B. Lee is an awesome YA author from LA, so definitely recommend her books.
I love CB's books. Those are sci-fi fantasy, young adult. Mm-hmm.
Just because I know you, Carrie, I'm going to recommend the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It's good.
You have to know I've already read that, Eliot.
Of course you have. Never mind then.
I'm sorry. I love you, but like I couldn't. It's so good.
And then to your first question, yes, I've seen cases where domestic violence has been written off by police upon finding out that one or both parties are bisexual, as some sort of just like, well, they're engaged in deviant behavior, so this is just not something we're going to get involved in. I would say that that's rare. It's kind of one of those things where you hear about it because it's unusual, but it is there. And I think I don't know that I would write that out so much to erasure. It's just stereotyping and being ill-informed, because one thing I think that the bi-legal community does not do well is reaching out to the courts and the police systems and educating them. And then at the same time, those systems don't do a good job of reaching out to get educated.
And we have this statistic, it's not directly responsive, but that bi women are much more likely to face intimate partner violence than other groups.
Right.
Bi people are also less likely to face, as Eliot was saying, litigation-wise, we also have the data showing that bi people who call the police are less likely to receive positive experiences. So that we have that data too. Sorry. And I strongly recommend this book, Dangerous Space by Kelly Eskridge, sorry. I like Kelly Link too, but Dangerous Space by Kelly Eskridge. It's a short story collection, but it has my favorite short story in the entire world, which has a non-binary poly-bi protagonist. The antagonist might be as well, but called Eye of the Storm. This is if you want to know Heron, read this story and you will know me. I have it by my bed and I read paragraphs from it sometimes because that's how good it is and important to me.
So we have a hand raised, Mike Smansky.
Hey,
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, I think I got it. Hey, everybody, I just wanted to let you know that because I am the editor of the Bi Plus blog, we will have I'll summarize a little bit of what you guys said, but I'll certainly preserve all the links that you've recommended so that the people who aren't here or who couldn't make it will be able to share that, and we'll be able to share that with them. And also, I didn't think I had much to care about this topic as far as the legal stuff, that it didn't affect me. I just wanted to come and see Heron, who I hadn't seen since Washington. And but just today, in fact, one of the reasons why I was late, there was an interesting issue. 2 people from the neighborhood council. We have this odd thing in LA where we have designated neighborhood councils that are actually elected, but not city government. They're kind of neighborhood concerned groups, and they're elected by the neighborhoods. And they kind of are little tyrants in certain neighborhoods. And I live in a historic neighborhood. Mimi has been here. And I found out that my house was designated, and the neighbor's house was designated, a party house. And that was partly because my nephew downstairs has late night parties and is a little bit too loud, but no police have ever been called. I have never been notified as this being a problem, but we're on a city list now that police will consider it a party house. I was talking to the couple, a male and a female, who are part of the members of this board, and they said, well, there's that flag up there. And I was like, what? And I, up in my place, which is separate from my nephew's place, have a bisexual flag flying out. And I've had it there for years. It's big, it's pretty. And I said, well, what's the problem with that? Well, you know, that shows that it's a party house. And I was like, what? What? Because it's bisexual? Oh, yeah, because it's bisexual. It must be a party house. And, you know, so we're concerned about that. And the people that you're bringing in. And I said, first of all, that's my flag, not my nephew's flag. And second of all, this is biphobic. And the woman said, biphobic? Biphobia? And I said, yeah, you made that up. They never even heard of that word. Are you talking about homophobic? And I said, well, that's part of it, but it's biphobic. It's specifically against bisexuality. If you're saying that my flag is part of the problem of this being called a party house, then yeah, that's biphobic. So, I mean, you know, it's like, I never even thought about how legal stuff would affect me. And yet on this day, in fact, only, you know, a couple of hours ago, I've had to deal with this and I'm really pissed off, but I don't know quite what to do. I talked to the neighbor who is also a party house. He owns the place. I talked to the owner. His a house is designated because he's renting to some famous DJs who are gay, and the gay couple who are DJs. And so he feels like it's homophobic against them because they're a gay couple. So, but they don't have a flag up or anything.
Yeah, well, definitely a negative stereotype. Though some bis like to party, but there are a lot of bis who are, you know, quiet introverts who like to curl up with a book and their cat.
As I do with my dogs. And but I, you know, and I've never been told that my flag was a problem in the neighborhood, but they said, you know, it doesn't fit into the historic nature of the area.
So there was a question. Oh, did you want to answer?
I just, what I was wondering was, is this something that could be a potential problem legally, or is there, I mean, I'm not taking down the flag. I've been threatened already with fines. The first one is $100. The second one is $5,000. I don't know. It would have to be because of an incident. My nephew is not going to have any parties past 10 o'clock anymore. I've given him the riot act, but and I'm probably going to write a letter to the council and also send that to our the police officer that's for our area as a designated senior police patrol officer, and also to the city councilwoman who is the actual person who has power in the neighborhood. So that I was going to do that, but I don't know. You know, is this something that you guys see as potentially litigious?
Well, I think you could, I mean, hopefully wouldn't have to litigate anything, but you could point to California's law protecting against LGBT discrimination, or there may even be like a city version as well, and say, hey, you can't, you know, designate my house a party house because that violates these laws that protect bisexuals from discrimination, is what I would think of saying in response.
One thing that I would consider doing if it were me, you know, the standard lawyer, I'm not licensed in your state, answer is if there is a process by which it happened, you could use some sort of FOIA law to find out what is the administrative process through which this occurs. And then maybe that would give you some idea of what you can do or how you could proceed from there.
Yes, and thank you for the link to the ACLU. Of course, that's an option. But luckily, I mean, hopefully it won't escalate. But you know, I'm not going to take the flag down, and I also have nude statues that I've also had to deal with. There was a female nude that even the neighbors pushed over in violation of, but I also have a Michelangelo David. So it's it does fit into the Mediterranean style of the nature of the neighborhood. So, although I've had protesters. So anyway, but thank you for your feedback.
Okay, I think, was there another question, Gladys, that I missed?
Yeah, we actually have 2 questions in the chat. So Lori wrote, since LGBTQ plus folks can be excluded from positions of power and traditional avenues of connection and advancement, how have mentors helped you in your career and life?
Great question.
I don't have mentors, and it has made me really, really sad. But what I do have are community, like co-mentors, peer mentors. I think the bi community is so incredible at reaching hands down and hands across, and not pulling up ladders when we were able to climb, and not shutting doors, and people are constantly opening doors for each other. I mean, Mimi is holding this and inviting all of us and introducing you, and I've been on panels with Anne, I've been on panels with Ezra, and we all just support one another and recommend each other for panels. And we have the bi-legal community, by law specifically. If you are a legal person, please come and check out by law. We have a Facebook group and a Google group, but more importantly, come to Lavender Law if you can, and join us at the By Law Caucus, which is one of the best hours and a half of my life every year, when I am in a room with 70 to 100 at sometimes bi attorneys and law students and judges who are sometimes openly weeping because this is the first bi space they've ever been in their lives. So that's what I would answer, how I answer that.
Thank you. I think we can get to our very last question really quickly.
Okay, sounds good. So Bren Frederick from the BiPAN Library is asking that we know BiPAN and MSpec folks as a group experience higher rates of mental illness, chronic illness, and physical disability than straight, lesbian, gay people. Have you seen that discrimination is significantly compounded for disabled bi plus folks? If so, how does it specifically show up?
And do you know if we have any data on that, or Mimi?
I haven't seen data specifically. I mean, I imagine that it would be.
Yeah, I mean, there's issues around access, right? Access to physical spaces, access to materials because of disabilities. There's invisible disabilities as well as visible ones. Yeah, I've heard it more discussed anecdotally amongst health professionals, but I haven't seen the research. But yeah, unfortunately.
I think that's an area where we do need to focus research.
Right, we can't just be single issue, right? As Ezra had mentioned earlier. Yeah. So I'm sure there's so many other questions, but you know, our time is up for our panel today, and I just wanted to thank you all just from the bottom of my heart for coming out and speaking to us, and for those of you, you know, watching and participating and engaging with us on this really important topic. Once again, the LA Bi Plus Task Force, you know, we are here to help promote education, advocacy, and cultural enrichment for the Bi Plus communities and allies in Greater LA, but also beyond, as we're doing right now. So please follow us, go to our website, and follow us on social media, our Instagram, our Facebook page, and subscribe to our newsletter for new episodes of our Bi-alogue series. So thank you again, and have a good night.